Let's take a further look at the different control attributes we have inside EnSight. For the different parts we have selected, you see up here in the top right hand corner of the EnSight window that we can change things like visibility, color, line thickness, visual symmetry, for example, but also do things like filtering based off of a variable, as well as control a lot of the attributes of the part. These are what we would consider kind of adjectives to modify the particular nouns that we have selected here. So for example, we could open up the color transparency here, and we have a detailed view of all the variables that we could color by, as well as all the constants, colors, as well as changing things like opacity and shininess, and a lot more advanced detail here of the coloring of that particular part. In addition, we have a palette option here, which will bring up the palette editor for the variable that that part is colored by. So for example, the clip plane here is colored by velocity, so we have the palette velocity up. Here we can change the range exactly, so we could type in a value of, let's say, 8 meters a second. We could also drag this bar left or right, as well as drag the middle left or right to control the range of the variables that we're looking at here. In addition to that, we can control the number of colors here with the number of levels. We can choose files as well here to change the palettes that are actually used. You can define your own palette. There's a number of preset palettes in here to change the RGB coloring through the variable range. One helpful item here which is available is the set range to. This will actually set the range to back to the extrema for the current time step, or for the selected parts, and we'll grab the min and max for that particular part and illustrate that here. That can be quite helpful to restrict the range and know what the real variable range is for you. So that's editing the details of the color palette. There's some other options under here under advanced, for example, controlling the RGB color band, as well as putting markers on the model, and options here for doing continuous or banded, limiting the fringes, the scale, and so forth. So you can change to a logarithmic scale. Perhaps looking at y plus is much more appropriate, looking at a logarithmic scale. With each of the options within EnSight, if you click on the help, you'll be taken to the help specifically for that option. So as you can see, we've clicked on help, and we're taken exactly to how to change the color, what all the different options mean, and it really is a good how-to information on modifying that particular attribute. Another new item in EnSight is the grouping. We can go through and select multiple parts. We can use the left select and the control key to select different parts. We could also use it in the main window here. We can select different parts using the control key and the left mouse button on the parts. Under the right click, we can say a new group. We can give it a group name, and those parts are stuck with an under group. Now in EnSight 10, these groups are quite dynamic. I can create another group, a subgroup in here. So I'd like to have another group here. This will be called group 2. And we can see that we can change different parts within a group as well. So I can drag the clip plane out. If I select the clip plane and drag it out and drop it onto the new group, it's put into the one group above. In addition, we could actually drag the vector arrow part and put it under this particular group, and so we can regroup and structure our model as we need to help with the organization of the model and the organization of the parts. We can collapse the groups here as well and be able to look at a smaller subset of our part list. This is quite helpful if we have a very long part list. In addition, in EnSight 10, we can tear off this window here, and we can place it here over the main window. We can also put it on another monitor, for example. So we can have a much more customized view of the parts in this case. We can do the same thing for the variables and the other attributes in our window here. As you can see, most things are customizable now in EnSight. I can make this parts list a little bit smaller. I could stick the part list over on the right hand side, for example, and just drop it in there. I can drop it back here as well. The items across the top of the window here are also customizable. I can click on this handlebar here and move this particular attribute to anywhere else in the window if I want to organize my window any other way. I can also do a right click here and customize the feature toolbar. I can add in different attributes and different icons into our toolbar so that we're customized to what you use most commonly. In addition to that, we can add in different things like putting the time or the keyframe control in here as well. These will automatically come up if we actually access the keyframe or time or flipbook for that example. They will automatically come up. Under the Customize Feature Toolbar option, we can go through and specify what we'd like to have as our layout of the icons across the top. So you can see here we have a separator bar here, and we have contours, ISO surfaces, clips, and so forth represented here. If there are other items that we'd like to add in, we can simply take it from the left-hand bar here. Let's say shock regions, we'll add it in, and perhaps move that down in the list so that it's a different location in our list. When we hit OK, we now have that shock surfaces represented here. We can go back to the Customize Feature Toolbar and restore the defaults at any time. We could also save so that these are saved when we come in the next time for our particular layouts of the icons across the top. In EnSight 10, we've also added a new pull-down menu here called Create. Under the Create allows us access to all the creation items that we had in previous versions of EnSight that may not necessarily be represented as icons across the top in the view that you have. So in this example, maybe I use the vortex cores infrequently, so I don't really need an icon for it, but I do still want to have access to it. I can go down here to the vortex core and we'll bring up the detail editor to create the vortex core definition. In EnSight 10, we now have further expanded our right-click capabilities here. We can see we have an inlet here, and we'd like to calculate streamlines through the domain. We can simply go over here and do a right-click on the inlet, and we can say particle trace. We'll ask us for how many tracers we'd like to release from this particular part. 100 is okay. EnSight is now going to release 100 particle traces from that part through the rest of the domain, and give us a pictorial representation of that streamline. We can also go right-click Edit and bring up the details of that particular streamline, changing things like, for example, annotation settings, the part which it was released from, the number of emitters, and so forth. So we still have detailed control here, although very quick access through the right-click menu to change items. We even have under the right-click Start Animation, so we can see an animation of the streamlines going through the model. If I turn off the part highlights, that will become a little bit more apparent here as we can see the streamlines go through. We can do a right-click, adjust things like speed and length, multiple pulses, so that we can have further control here. We can also go back to the edits and control all the details of the animate settings right here as well. So we might change it with spheres. We might make it go a little bit longer, or perhaps go a little bit faster through the domain. So we can customize how that animation takes place here as well. We'll turn off that animation, so we can double click on the particle trace part, and we'll simply toggle off the animate section here. So you've seen our ability to click and go. We can modify this section cut. We can click on any of the model parts, the created parts, and adjust them as we see fit. And we can double click them to adjust their exact control. Again, with the right click onto the clip plane, we can do things like put on contours. It'll ask us for the variable that we want to see a contour of. In this case, let's look at contours of velocity. And we can see that we have contours of velocity in here. Let's actually make them, let's color them by black so we can see them a little bit better. So here's our contours of velocity. We can again left click on the contour, drag up to increase the number of contours, or drag down to decrease the number of contours. This adds sublevels into our contours so that we can see the gradients, in this case of velocity, much easier. further extending the concept of the right click, if I do a right click over the background of the viewport, I can simply go here and say I'd like to have some quick text. And in this case here, I can see that I can edit and put in very quick annotations here. So we can say title here. For my particular annotation, we can tie things such as fonts. So let's choose an italic font. So actually put that at the beginning. So we'll put in an italic font here. We can add in things like special values for the location of the clips and symbols. We can also change things with regards to the color and the exact locations of this annotation here as well. As we hover over the part, we have the same type of handle that we can move the annotation around. We can drag to increase here, as well as we can do a right click over the annotation, and we have some of the very common things that we would do, like changing colors, adjusting the size, justification, and font very quickly through the right click menu. So again, if ever in doubt, right click over the particular part and you have a list of the most common things that you could do to that part, changing values, adjusting, creating clips, coloring, and hiding the part from the visibility are very common things within the right click menu that we can do. And this extends to both annotations, model parts, created parts, legends, viewports, and so forth are all easily modifiable here within this particular right click menu option. So without having to adjust and remember where different icons are or different capabilities are, if we simply hover the mouse over the part, we can see that we can hide different parts, we can change levels, adjust the variable, for example, on the contours, as well as add in our display and really customize to really what we want to see. Let's put on the wall here and let's make this transparent. So do a right click, make transparent, and so now that we can see inside the model and look at our clip plane that we have illustrated with contours on it with a nice title. Please visit cisoftware.com for more tutorial videos.